Sachs Fish and Chip restaurant in Keswick opened up in the 1950s. Since that time, it's become a very popular spot for locals arriving for dinner. However, now they have a new set of customers called ghosts.
I feel there's a huge crowd of people behind me. I've never really experienced this before. Perhaps with everyone talking and all the energy that we're giving off, it's drawing the spirits closer to us.
The night of the investigation, our psychic picked up about 14 different spirits here, I believe.
Carolyn was very close to her uncle, Eddie, who cared for her. And when he passed away, it's quite possible that he ended up remaining her guardian in the restaurant.
My parents purchased the property in March 6th of 1949, and when anything weird or unusual happened, we just kind of filed it in the Uncle Eddie category. Uncle Eddie passed away in 1969 when I was really little. Uncle Eddie came to live with us when I was about a year old, and he was I guess you'd call it Alzheimer's now. We didn't know what it was then, so my parents had him move in with us. And he used to take care of me when my parents were running the restaurant. So he was kind of like my built-in babysitter. He lived with us. And I remember being in my pajamas and the sun was coming up and he was sitting in his chair and he was like, it's okay, sweetie, I want you to go back to bed now. Everything's fine, everything will be great. You just go on back to bed now and I'll see you a little later. So I went back to bed, did what I was told, went back into bed and I heard a little bit of commotion out in the living room area a couple hours later. My mom came into my bedside and she knelt down and she said, honey, I just want you to stay in bed for a little bit because there's some men here and they've come to take Uncle Eddie away because Uncle Eddie died last night. It didn't bother me because I knew he was still here. And I still have this sense that, you know, he said everything was going to be okay, but I knew he was gone, but he wasn't.
Carolyn, the owner, who also works in the kitchen as a cook, has had a number of experiences. One of them being when she turns the gas stove on and then turns around, goes back to the stove later, the knob has been turned off.
There have been a few incidences in the kitchen with other staff members where they have had light objects tossed in their direction and have struck them that haven't fallen off a shelf or really seem to almost come out of nowhere.
Pots and pans and other objects have a tendency to move on their own. And Carolyn has witnessed this, felt the presence in this kitchen, and perhaps it might be her Uncle Eddie.
And it hasn't been until recently that we've really had a lot of people coming in and seeing different sized people, different dressed people, children. It's been brought to my knowledge that it's not necessarily just Uncle Eddie doing these things. That's why they didn't always fit in with his personality type or his physical description.
One time, a psychic visited the restaurant and reported a number of spirits inhabiting the dwelling. For example, there's a little girl that's seen at the front entrance skipping by a table.
I felt the presence of a child around me and I turned and looked. There was this young child, maybe about 7 years old, standing behind me. She seems to flit around from table to table. Anytime there's children here, she seems to be drawn to the children.
The little girl that's seen at the front of the restaurant also likes to climb up and sit on the counter. I wonder whose attention she's seeking.
The child is here. The child is sitting on that stool, watching, smiling. I can see her.
Well, when it comes to psychics, there's never been a case where a psychic who claims to have these special psychic abilities has been able to demonstrate them under conditions that rule out either misperception or fraud or whatever. So we should be very cautious about psychics even to begin with. But if a psychic walks into a room and claims to be seeing things here, there, and all over, people who are not very cautious may in fact take this as they might take eyewitness testimony. The psychic could look at anything and say anything, and some people would believe that. It's interesting, the old traditional used car dealer would tell people things, but people were naturally suspicious of used car dealers because they expected them to mislead them somewhat. Psychics earn their reputation by doing psychic things. The psychic has a vested interest in getting people around him or her to believe that they are psychic. And so one should, for that reason as well, be particularly cautious about people who claim to be psychics. In some sense, the psychic is perhaps the worst witness in the world, because the psychic has something to prove, in a sense. The psychic is out to prove that he or she is psychic. That's his or her reputation. And so there's probably less credibility to be associated with that kind of report than there is with somebody who has nothing to prove.
At the moment, there's a very, very strong feeling of anger. I think there's more fear, but fear and anger can be combined. This entity here is not pleased with what's happening. I'm feeling very anxious that I want to get out of here. There's an oily feeling to my skin. It's very thick in that corner, and I really feel that there could be a danger in here.
One spirit that resides in the basement appears to be quite an evil person. Most of the employees working in the restaurant fear for themselves in terms of going down into this basement. That's a place they do not want to go.
My staff doesn't like going to the basement. Just more an overwhelming sense of a bad sense about the basement. I've had a few staff members know exactly what spot we're talking about on the floor, literally within like a 3x3 space. They're like, I know he's there because I walk through there, and it's just like takes your breath away. You feel cold or chilled. The hair on the back of your neck stands up. You just feel extremely uncomfortable, and you want to get away as soon as you possibly can.
The man downstairs is not happy, and he's been there for a long time. He's very, very angry, and I didn't feel comfortable with him at all.
Down in the basement, we had a couple of encounters. Something grabbed onto my pant leg, tugged 3 times. I just carried on, and about 30 seconds later, I felt a hand on my leg, and it squeezed 3 times. After that, I finished up what I was doing and went into the upstairs area.
If there's a lot of activity within a home or a building of some sort, happiness, sadness, anxiety, whatever, the energy lingers. And there must be something here that pulls the entities or the spirits or the energy to this spot. And they're waiting to pass on. I don't know. Waiting to be reincarnated. I don't know. That's the big question.
We do know that Uncle Eddie is probably in the kitchen with Carolyn. We don't know who is in the basement. That presence is unexplained. And we also know that perhaps the restaurant, there was something there before that restaurant. We don't know what it was, what had happened there, and it remains unexplained.